Recording in progress.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Your Money Your Life podcast. We're at episode 237 of the pod. So make sure wherever you're listening, you like, subscribe, 5-star rate, and review the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, do the same things. We are back. We didn't skip a beat. I'm back, married, happy, Tanner. So many things happened last week, but thank you to all the people that came and one, sent messages of support. Two, the New York local clients, New Street, Team New Street, that actually attended the wedding. We had an amazing time at a rooftop, an amazing reception, which was, a highlight of my life. So thank you all for those that came out and showed support. We'll get into the episode this week. There's a lot to talk about in regards to news. There's a lot to talk about in regards to the market. And there's a lot to talk about in regards to us getting back to our personal finance question of the week, which we do every so often around with the roundtable. So let's dive right into, first and foremost, a market update. As I sit here now, past 5 days of the market have actually been fairly decent. They've actually been fairly decent. If you look at it, we've had almost a 4% gain over the past week. And now, remember, it's been a kind of a volatile month for the market. We saw dips, we saw drops, we saw corrections, and we've seen a little bit of rebound. Is that a full-fledged rebound? Is that a bear market trap where you see a drop and then you see a little uptick and everything's fine, and then you see an even bigger drop? We don't know yet, but let's look at some of the data that's come out over the last few days. One being the stock market, the futures are up today after retail sales increased 1% in July, far surpassing an estimate from the Dow Jones forecast that was a 0.3% uptick. So this is pretty much showing that, hey, maybe there isn't some big recession that everybody was anticipating when they got some other data prior to. Also saw jobless weekly jobless claims fall for the week. And this data is like a big good news. It's the bone that bull market investors wanted to try to mount a comeback from, pretty much what we've seen since the beginning of August was a little bit of a correction. So again, it's throwing different data is showing different things. You had inflation data this week that largely swept investors away, swept away investors' recessionary fears prior to Thursday's swath of economic data and led to a rebound in equities. So several companies are also revealing, 13F is regulatory filings for big investment managers. And it shows in a historical sense of what they're holding. And it's a closely watched thing to see what the big guys are holding, right? And so they show that Berkshire Hathaway, like Warren Buffett, was adding to Ultra Beauty. He also cut a lot of his Apple stake. And so the people are trying to read into what is Warren Buffett thinking. Again, this is backdated, so it happened end of Q2. So this is stuff that moves that are already enacted in June, but it comes out later, right? So people can't, it's a backdated report. You also saw that Nike shares at about 3% after Bill Ackman's Persian Square revealed the possession of the sneaker giant. So Bill Ackman is making a dive and buying into some Nike shares. So this 13F filing, again, it's for large asset managers that have to file and reveal what they're holding, and it's backdated and historical, so you don't get it real time, but you get to see what moves they're making in a historical sense. So it's a quarterly report as well. The big news, again, more market news. Starbucks, they had a huge market shaking news. They fired their current CEO, or now ex CEO, and they hired the Chipotle CEO, which Chipotle we know has done a incredible job over the last decade in building and growth and operations. And Starbucks is trying to enact some of that into their playbook. And so they fired their CEO and they hired Brian Nickel. They gave him 10 million in cash and 75 million in equity awards for joining um, for joining Starbucks and leaving Chipotle. Nickel will have a base salary of 1.6 with the opportunity to earn up to 7.2 million more in cash. And that's probably incentives and bonuses and how the company does. But again, it was huge news. What happened was when Starbucks hired the CEO for Chipotle, their stock price went up. I think it was like 10-15% gain. And Chipotle stock price went down. And Starbucks hasn't performed very well over the past year, besides that bump that they had with this hiring. And so let's look at the numbers historically. Year to date, they actually have not done really well, right? So this company's been performing badly. the CEO rightfully got fired. They make the hiring of the Chipotle CEO. The stock price jumps. They believe the market believes that this guy Brian Nichols is really good at what he does, and he's going to make Starbucks have a strong turnaround. Conversely, if you look at what happened with Chipotle stock, CMG, again, they year to date they were doing well, right? Past 5 days, this is the drop when they lost their CEO. It's rebounded a little bit, but again, they lose their CEO, who is credited a lot with their performance over the last decade or last 5 years or so. And so it's a stock that's performed really, really well. And so they've lost that key driver, key leader, key management. So that's something to watch. It was huge news what people say about Brian Nichols. Brian Nichols proved himself to be one of the most effective leaders in our industry, generating significant financial returns over many years. This is what Starbucks said in a statement. His compensation in Starbucks is tied directly to company's performance and the shared success of all stakeholders. We're confident in his ability to deliver long-term enduring value for our partners, customers, and shareholders. So they're trying to justify his compensation. But again, it's all flows to the top, right? Top rated players will get the most compensation, right? That's just how it is. LeBron makes 50 million a year on his salary. Um, a bench player makes like, $1, $2, $3 million. So it flows to the top. And so you can't really say it's not justified if he's going to bring billions of dollars in value, which he already did just based on the hiring announcement of the new CEO. So we'll keep our eyes on how they perform in the next couple of years. That's going to be really, really intriguing, actually, to see if he can rectify or if he can duplicate that performance. Let's keep going. Walmart is upbeat on U.S. consumers. So as Walmart goes, a lot of people say it's a bellwether stock. As it goes, the nation goes. So Walmart beat estimates last quarter, reported Thursday, with revenue up nearly 5% in e-commerce sales. Their online sales surging 22% in the U.S., even as net income dropped. It's the largest retailer in the country. It's considered somewhat of a bellwether, as I said, for American spending habits. So the CFO, John David Rainey, said that the latest results suggest customers remain choiceful, discerning, value seeking, but importantly, they don't see any additional fraying of consumer health. So they don't think the consumer is doing that bad, which I tend to agree with. We've been saying that the consumer will do bad and bad, but I don't think it's happening, especially if you look at, different wages and different job switching people could do to increase wages. Consumers doing just fine. And I think that's a huge thing. People keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. It hasn't dropped. I was even waiting beginning of the year, a year ago, 2 years ago, and it hasn't happened. And I don't think it's going to. It's a Walmart saying they don't see it. People are being value driven. They're still shopping. They're still getting stuff they need. They have the ability to do so, and they're fine. And that's what Walmart is saying, and it's reflected in their report. So we'll keep an eye on what Walmart's doing. Speaking of the consumer, inflation, again, we saw a key price gouge just show the slowest growth in more than 3 years in inflation, reinforcing expectations for the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates in September. Remember, the Federal Reserve is looking for inflation, their metrics they look at, to hit their targets so that they can decide if they need to cut rates in September, by what amount they would cut it. And so you see it, the U.S. Consumer Price Index in July rose 2.9% from a year earlier. That's the lowest level since March 2021. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported Wednesday. Expectations have been for a 3% increase, so they were a little bit below that. And this is the lowest level. This level has dropped from a peak of 9.1% in 2022. Remember that? 2022, we were talking about it 2 years ago. And now the rate of inflation has slowed to 2.9%. So you look at this chart here, you're seeing it. This is the peak, 9.1 in 2022, and now we're at 2.9% inflation. So that just means the level, the rate at which the basket of goods and services is increasing year over year is slowing down significantly. That doesn't mean the price have gone back to normal, because they're not going to go back to where they were 2, 3 years ago. But the rate at which they increase are actually going to be a lot slower now. So that's what it's saying. Inflation frameworks, goods deflation from pandemic unwind drove most of the fall in core CPI, but that is coming to the end. In the near term, services disinflation from increased labor supply, thanks to immigration, could take inflation lower still. So this is what YMYL is talking about. YMYL. The runway seems clear for September Fed rate cut. Granted, we still have more payroll and round of inflation. As inflation fear gave way to growth fear, retail sales and claims tomorrow may actually matter a bit more. So this is what Whaley said. in her LinkedIn post. But again, it's really intriguing to see, good numbers on inflation. It's clearing the path for the September rate cut, which we most likely will get 25 basis point rate cut next month. We'll see. I think that's the biggest consensus right now, is 25 basis points in September. Speaking of more news, the FTC is cracking down on fake reviews. The Federal Trade Commission has issued a broad new regulation targeting businesses that flood websites and e-commerce platforms with fake reviews or consumer testimonials. Under new rules, the FTC may levy fines and penalties against businesses that push and commission positive reviews, suppress negative reviews. Interesting enough, I haven't seen that much of an issue, but I'm assuming there are plenty of fake ones out there. And I guess they're just trying to crack down on it. Do people still look at reviews before they buy a product? Is a review just asking your friend or someone else that's using it, or is it actually looking at the online reviews? I've never really took that much stock into the online reviews. I don't know if people do, but it'll be interesting to see. Let me know. Apple is developing a tabletop robot. Apple's hard at work developing a tabletop robot. This device is reported to consist of an iPad-like screen that's attached to a robotic arm and function as a video conference device and home security tool. Has reportedly ramped up development in recent months with longtime exec Kevin Lynch, who previously oversaw the company's scrapped electric car project. So, okay, so it's a tabletop robot, probably has a bunch of AI, language model capabilities, probably just do your basic tasks and maybe some other things. Do you think this is needed in the marketplace? Do you see a space for you yourself and the things that you daily use using this tabletop robot? I mean, Apple products usually stick. Besides the Vision Pros, which I was obsessed with for like 3 days, 2 days, and now I no longer care about. Um, do they stick? And most of their products stick. Watch. I thought, oh, I don't need the watch. I've worn the watch for 4 or 5 years ever since. Earpods, and we all said we didn't need them. We have them in our ears all the time. Every product they use tends to stick. We'll see if this one does. The one that missed, I believe, so far, the Vision Pros. Don't see them anymore. You don't see people wearing them. It kind of fell off the face of the earth, but everything else sticks. So I'm curious to see what it looks like. Maybe it's a couple years out. It's a personal home robot. It's ditching this electric car project. They're looking into the robot. So I'm curious to see how this plays out. It's going to be one we need to keep our eye on. We talked about the rate cut in September. Um, the last meeting, the Fed suggested that it's less hawkish on crushing inflation. So we'll see about that. See if there's any interesting stories that we need to talk about that we haven't yet talked about. Any interesting Universal Music Group and Meta expand their partnership as labels lean on social media. So UMG, big record label company, uh, is now expanding. It's a public company. It's expanding its partnership with Meta. They announced they beefed up version of their multi-year music licensing deal, which makes UMG's songs available to share on Meta's apps, Reels, soundtracks. UMG is the world's largest record label. They rep stars like Billie Eilish, Bad Bunny, Taylor Swift. You remember that they had their big falling out with TikTok, if I'm not mistaken. And now they've settled that. But UMG, huge company, and they're expanding this partnership. It looks like, with Meta and allowing for their licensed songs artists to now be on, in a multi-year deal to be on Meta. So that's big news. I think it's big news. UMG execs say they refresh the deal, expands money-making opportunities, addresses issues with artist royalties. UMG's also worked with Meta to curb unauthorized AI-generated content. That's huge. That's going to be really huge in the next few years. AI-generated content. How do you quell that? How do you stop that? Oh, this is an interesting story. Equinox Blink Fitness files for bankruptcy, as gyms feel the post-pandemic strain. So Equinox lower cost offshoot Blink. I didn't know Blink was affiliated with Equinox, but it seems like they are, of course. They have now filed for bankruptcy yesterday. Blink has 100 US locations, 2K employees, and 440,000 plus paying members. It said we'll keep the doors open and treasures running while it looks for a buyer to deadlift it out of bankruptcy. Blink playing its woes on the pandemic. It's forced to close for 9 months. It racked up 280 million in debt. And so they blame the pandemic and they didn't get out of that rut since the pandemic. And now they're going filing for bankruptcy and looking for a buyer. If someone can really figure out how to turn that ship around operationally, rebranding. It could be an opportunity for someone, but it looks for now they're going to look for a buyer to take them out of that rut. Let's jump into our questions of the week. We haven't had some for a while. We have some fresh ones. We have some new ones. We're going to dive into those and see if you folks know the answers. The first one being, where do most 18 to 24-year-olds, or where do most young people, young adults, say they learn about finance? I would say it's online. One, two, books. Three, parents. I would say so. Answer: 79% of young adults in America representing the millennial or Gen Z age groups have gotten financial advice from social media. Social media sources are where young adults read information, and so YouTube is top 47%, and that's why Your Money Your Life, our podcast, is now on YouTube. Reddit 47%, TikTok 32%, Instagram 21, Twitter 18, and Facebook 11%. So LinkedIn also 7%. So again, you're seeing the shift to learning online. This was a no-brainer to me, as you could see, especially for young people. YouTube is a big tool for young people. They're learning. It's a give and take. 'Cause you got to be careful with everywhere you learn. I guess careful in the sense that it may be information that's not super helpful for you or super relevant for you. But if you could weed that out and learn to weed out certain information and understand what's correct, what is actually certified, what is actually something you should be ingesting as far as information, then you'll be okay. But if you can't do that, it could be a bumpy road for you, that's for sure. And next question: what is the average amount of money that families spend back to school items? School is coming back. School is coming back. Football is coming back. A lot of things coming back. We have so much in the works in fall, spring, winter, everything. But back to the question, I think the average, what, 400 or 500 bucks? I don't even know. What do they spend on back to school items? Okay, the average is $874. I didn't add clothing and shoes in there. I was just doing supplies, electronics. But if you add clothing and shoes, of course you're going to get to $874. But let's see what the so total expected spending per household. Interesting. Okay, so this is telling us a little bit more about the expected spending per household, and the total spending in 2024 across everyone expected is about 35 billion. 35 billion back to school. It's a huge industry, back to school industry. Well, folks, that's it for this week's Your Money Your Life podcast. Thanks as always for joining us. Make sure you tune in every week and share, like, subscribe this with family and friends. We will see you next week.